At 2:40 in the morning, in fog thick enough to drink, the Queen Consort's cars came through the freight gate of Myron Fields with their headlamps off. I am Hesper Quill. For 19 years I have been an officer of the Crown Customs, and for the last 6 of them, the senior officer of the Royal Pavilion at Myron Fields, which is the small private aerodrome where the House of Harrogate keeps its aircraft and its dignity. I know what an honest departure looks like. It looks like paperwork lodged 8 hours ahead, a manifest with a wet signature, a chief steward who complains about the coffee. It does not look like 6 black cars rolling out of the fog with their lamps dark and their engines low, at the hour when even the ground crew are asleep in the warming hut. I was in the manifest office with a cold cup of tea and a stack of export declarations that would not sort themselves. I heard the tires on the wet apron before I saw anything at all. Then the first car came out of the murk like something surfacing, and behind it the second, and behind that a freight lorry with its canvas laced tight, and I stood up so fast I put my knee into the desk drawer and did not feel it until an hour later. There were 2 men on the pavilion door that night. One was a boy of the Royal Guard named Pell, 19 years old, whose bearskin still sat on him like a borrowed hat. The other was Corporal Ansel Croy. You will want to know about Croy, so I will tell you now and be done with it, because he would never tell you himself. He was 34. He had been 11 years in the Royal Guard and 4 of those on the manifest watch, which is the least glamorous duty the Guard possesses, and the one they give to the men they trust with dull, unwatched things. Ceremonial guards get the forecourt and the gates and the photographs. The manifest watch gets the goods door. It is a duty that exists because 200 years ago a duke of the realm loaded the contents of a royal chapel onto a barge and sailed it to a foreign buyer, and the crown decided afterwards that no chest, crate, trunk, or case would ever again leave the realm on the crown's own conveyance without a guardsman standing at the tailgate to see the manifest and the freight agree. That is the whole of it. A man in a red tunic and a black bearskin stands where the luggage is loaded, and he counts. Croy was not a large man. He was built like a fence post, narrow, upright, weathered, and he had a face that gave you nothing at all, and hands that were always, without fail, in clean white gloves. I had worked beside him for 4 years, and in that time I had heard him volunteer perhaps 100 words. He did not chat. He did not lean. On the worst night of the winter, when the fog froze on the railings and my own men were stamping and swearing in the warming hut, Croy stood at the goods door of the Royal Pavilion with frost on his chin strap and did not move, and when I brought him tea he said, "I'm on duty, ma'am," and did not take it, and I never offered again. I tell you this so you understand what the Queen Consort was walking into, and why she did not understand it herself. Because a woman like Morwenna looks at a man like Croy and sees a fixture, a hat stand, a thing that stands where it is put. That was her mistake, and it was not a small one, and she made it in front of 11 witnesses at 2:45 in the morning. The cars came to a stop in the loading apron in a curve, the way a hand closes. Doors opened. The first man out was Lord Cassius, and I knew before he had his second foot on the tarmac that something in the world had gone crooked, because Cassius was a man who never hurried, and he was hurrying. He came across the wet concrete with a leather folio under his arm, and his coat unbuttoned and his hair, which was ordinarily a work of architecture, flat on one side, and he went straight past me as though I were a bollard, straight to the pavilion door, and he said to Croy, "Open it, we're loading." "Sir," said Croy. That was all, just the word. But he did not move out of the doorway, and Cassius pulled up short with his hand already out for the latch. "Did you hear me? We are loading, the aircraft is fueled. The Queen Consort flies at 3. "Then I'll want the manifest, sir," said Croy. And behind Cassius, the door of the second car opened, and Queen Consort Morwenna got out into the fog. I had seen her perhaps a dozen times at Myron Fields, always in daylight, always with a great deal of arrangement around her, the standard on the aircraft, the line of ground staff, the photographer from the court circular. That night there was none of it. She wore a traveling coat of dark green and no jewelry I could see, and her hair was pinned in the plain way a woman pins it when she has done it herself, and she walked across that apron like a woman who has decided something and does not intend to be talked out of it. Behind her, 4 men in plain clothes were already at the lorry, unlacing the canvas. "Corporal," she said. She had a beautiful voice. I will not pretend otherwise. It was the kind of voice that makes a corridor go quiet. "I am flying to Vascaray on a private matter. My luggage will be loaded now. Stand aside." "Ma'am," said Croy, "there's no manifest lodged." "There is." She did not even look at him. She looked past him at the pavilion door as though it were the only thing in the conversation that mattered. "Lord Cassius has it." Cassius opened the folio and produced a single sheet, and offered it, and Croy took it in his white gloves and read it. "Now, I want you to see this properly, because everything that happened afterwards happened because of the next 90 seconds. Croy read it the way a man reads a thing he has read 1,000 times before. He read it slowly. He did not skim. The fog moved past us in slow sheets, and somewhere out on the apron, a fuel bowser was ticking as it cooled, and Morwenna stood 4 feet from him with her hands in her coat pockets, and let her breath go out in a long, visible line, and Cassius shifted his weight from foot to foot like a man standing on a hot floor. And Croy read. Then he lowered the sheet and said, "This declares 9 trunks, ma'am, personal effects, linen, garments, books, total declared weight 410 pounds. Yes, there are 11 trunks on the lorry." I turned and looked, so did Cassius, and there were. Under the loosened canvas, in 2 ranks, there were 11 great old-fashioned cabin trunks bound in brass at the corners, the kind that go in the hold of a ship, and I counted them twice because I did not trust myself, and 11 was the number both times. Morwenna did not turn around. She said, "Then 2 are empty and traveling for the return. Load them." "Ma'am," said Croy, "I'll need them declared." There was a small silence. Out in the fog, the aircraft, the Halcyon asterisk, the King's second machine, a long white thing with the Harrogate cormorant on its tail, sat with its cabin lights burning and its air stair down, and I could see the pilot at the top of the steps with his cap under his arm, watching us. "Corporal Croy," said Morwenna, and now she did turn, and now she did look at him, and the beautiful voice had gone very level and very cold. "Do you know who I am?" "I do, ma'am," said Croy. "Then you understand that you do not require me to declare anything." "With respect, ma'am," said Croy, "the chattels of the Crown Act requires it. Clause 4. Nothing leaves the realm on a crown conveyance but by warrant and against a true manifest. It doesn't say unless the traveler is grand asterisk. I have thought about that sentence a great deal since. I have thought about the fact that he said it in exactly the same voice he used to say I'm on duty, ma'am, when I brought him tea. Not 1 degree warmer, not 1 degree colder. He was not being brave. That is the part people misunderstand when they tell the story now. He was not being brave. He was being accurate, and it turned out that accuracy, at 2:45 in the morning in the fog, was the most dangerous thing in the kingdom of Eldermore. Morwenna looked at him for perhaps 3 seconds. Then she smiled and turned to Cassius and said, "Give him the warrant." And Cassius, I saw this. I was 6 feet away. Cassius hesitated. It was nothing, a half-beat, a man reaching into a folio and finding, for the length of 1 breath, that his hand did not want to go in. Then he had it out and he passed it over, a heavy folded document on the stiff cream paper the Chancery uses, and it had a red wax seal on it the size of a crown piece, and Croy took it. "An export warrant," said Cassius, and his voice had gone up half a tone, "sealed by the master of the household, countersigned. That is what you asked for, Corporal, and that is what you have. Now stand aside and let the men load." Croy held it in both gloved hands at chest height and tilted it to the pavilion light. And here I must tell you the second thing about Ansel Croy, the thing that nobody at Myron Fields knew, including me, until that night. Before the guard, he had been 4 years a clerk in the Chancery. A warrant clerk, one of the gray men in the seal room, who take the wax and the dye and the ribbon and make a piece of paper into an instrument of the crown. He had been sent there at 17 because his father had been a seal cutter, and his father's father before that. And when a boy comes out of that house, he goes to the seal room the way a smith's son goes to the forge. His father had cut the master of the household's die, the current one. In the year the late Queen Isolde died, when the old die cracked across the base and had to be replaced, it was Croy's father who sat at the bench in Chancery Yard for 11 weeks with a graver and a glass and cut the new one out of a blank of steel. And on the third point of the crown from the left, the third point, mind, his graver slipped and left a hairline nick, a fault you would need a good light and a knowing eye to find. They kept it. Chancery always keeps the fault. That is the oldest rule in the seal room, and I did not know it then, though I know it now. A die is not a picture, it is a fingerprint. Any competent forger can copy the crown, the motto, the ring of laurel. Almost none of them copy the flaw because they do not know the flaw is there, and because a forger's whole instinct is to make the thing perfect. So Ansel Croy stood in the doorway of the royal pavilion at Myron Fields, with a warrant of the crown in his white gloves, and he tilted it to the light, and he looked at the third point of the crown from the left. And it was perfect. I saw his face change. I want to be careful here, because people have since made a great deal of this and have him gasping or reeling or some such nonsense, and he did nothing of the kind. What happened was this. A muscle moved at the hinge of his jaw once, and his eyes came up off the paper, and for the first time in 4 years I saw Corporal Ansel Croy look directly at another human being. He looked at Lord Cassius. And Cassius, who had been about to say something, did not say it. "Ma'am," said Croy to Morwenna, "I'm going to ask you to have the trunks brought into the hall and set on the scale." "You are not." "Clause 9, ma'am. Where the manifest and the freight disagree, the watch shall weigh, and where the weight and the manifest disagree, the watch shall open." "Open?" It came out of her like a struck note. "You will open the Queen Consort's luggage on a asterisk scale in a asterisk shed." "If the numbers don't agree, ma'am." "Yes." "Corporal, that aircraft leaves at 3 o'clock. "Then it leaves empty, ma'am, or it leaves light." And that right there, at 8 minutes to 3 in the morning in the fog in the doorway of a freight shed on a private aerodrome, was the moment the Queen Consort of Eldermore lost the realm. She did not know it. None of us knew it. But it was gone from her the instant that soft, flat voice said it leaves empty, ma'am, or it leaves light, and the rest of the night was only the working out. She turned on her heel. She walked 6 paces back towards the cars. And then she stopped and stood a moment with her back to us in the sodium haze, and I watched her shoulders come down and settle, and I thought, she is not going to shout. She is going to do something worse. She took out a telephone. "Sir Oren," she said, "come down to the freight shed. There is a corporal here who needs to be told what he is." Sir Oren Falk was the controller of Myron Fields. He was a man with a great deal of gold on his sleeve and very little iron in his spine, and he was on the apron in under 4 minutes, which meant he had not been asleep, which meant he had known the cars were coming, and that was the first honest piece of information I had all night. He came bustling out of the fog in a greatcoat with his cap on crooked. He looked at Morwenna, and he did a sort of bow that got halfway and gave up. Then he looked at Croy. "Corporal, stand down. This is a royal flight." "Sir," said Croy, "the manifest is short by 2 trunks, and I have a warrant here I can't certify." "You can't asterisk certify," Falk laughed. It was not a good laugh. It went up at the end and stopped too suddenly. "You're a guardsman. You're not asked to certify anything. You are asked to stand at a door." The manifest watch certifies, sir. That's what the watch is. Then I am relieving you of it. Go back to the pavilion and stand at the front where you belong, and I will pass this freight myself, on my own authority as controller." "You haven't got that authority, sir," said Croy. Falk's face went the color of a plum. "I'm sorry, sir," said Croy, and he was not sorry. He was simply putting the word where the sentence needed one. "But the watch is set by the master of the household and lifted by the master of the household, not by the controller of an aerodrome. If you want me off this door, you'll want Lord Staines' hand on it, and I'd want to see the seal, and after tonight, sir, I'd want to see it under a glass." And then Croy did the only thing that night that I would call theatrical, and even then he did it so plainly that you could have missed it. He stepped back from the doorway. He turned. He set his gloved hand flat on the brass corner of the nearest trunk on the lorry bed in front of 11 witnesses. And he said, "Nothing on this vehicle boards that aircraft." The fog came in off the runway in a long gray wall and swallowed the tail of the halcyon asterisk, and out beyond the perimeter fence, a dog barked twice and stopped, and nobody on that apron said anything at all for the length of a slow 10 count. Then Morwenna said very quietly, "Sir Orrin, have the ground crew load the trunks." And Sir Orrin Falk, controller of Myron Fields, looked at the guardsman with his white glove on the brass corner of the trunk, and did not move. That was when I knew we were going to be there until dawn. I want to be honest about the next part, because if I dress it up I am no better than the people who have since told this story in the tea rooms. For about 40 seconds I said nothing. I stood in the fog with my clipboard against my chest, and I did the arithmetic that every official in every service in every kingdom on earth does at some point in a career. This is not my fight, and the man in the doorway will lose it, and if I am standing next to him when he loses it I will lose too. I had a pension. I had a daughter at the school in Carden. I had, God help me, a very clear picture of the letter that would arrive at my house in 4 days' time, thanking me for 19 years of service. And then I looked at Ansel Croy's glove on the brass corner of that trunk, and I remembered a crate. 10 years ago, at the old freight gate, a titled man had come through with 3 crates and a temper and a story about a horse, and my supervisor had waved them past because it was late, and because the man was who he was, and 8 months later it came out that the crates had held 400 years of a chapel's silver, and it was not my supervisor who was broken for it. He retired to the coast with his garden and his gout. It was a customs officer of 26 named Del Kettering, who had signed the sheet because he was told to, and who never got another post in the service, and who is a groundsman now at a school I will not name. I have never signed anything I did not read since, not one thing, not once. So I stepped forward into the light and I said, "Sir Orrin, before you make a decision you can't unmake, you should know that Crown Customs has been asked to pass 11 trunks against a 9-trunk declaration, and Crown Customs has not passed them, and Crown Customs is not going to." Falk stared at me as though a bollard had spoken after all. "You," he said, "this is a *royal flight, Officer Quill. Then it will be a royal seizure, sir, if I'm wrong, and I'll take that. But nothing goes into a hold on my apron against a false sheet. It is not a * false sheet. It's short by 2 trunks, sir, that's the definition." Behind me I heard the smallest sound. I think it was Croy shifting his weight. I have decided since that it was not, and that I imagined it, and that he stood exactly as still as he always did, but at the time I thought, he has just moved his feet, and he did it to stand nearer to me. Morwenna came back across the apron. She came slowly, and she came smiling, and that was the moment the night changed its shape, because a woman like that does not smile when she is winning. She had spent her rage on Croy, and it had rolled off him like water off wax cotton, so now she was going to try the other thing. "Officer Quill," she said, "Hesper." I had never in my life told that woman my given name. Ma'am, you must be very cold. She said it kindly. That was the awful part. She said it the way you would say it to a friend. You've been standing out here in this since what, 3? Look at you. And for what account? She let her eyes go over the trunks and the lorry and the fog and come back to me, and she was still smiling. 9 or 11, 400 pounds or 5. Do you truly believe the king cares? It isn't the king's count, ma'am, I said. It's the realm's. How well you say that. She turned her head a fraction. Corporal Croy, your mother lives in Vale Row, does she not? Number 16. Nothing moved in his face, nothing at all. She does, ma'am, he said. That is a hard street. It is, ma'am. There are men in this household, said Morwenna gently, who could make it a great deal softer, or a great deal harder. It is remarkable, really, how few people ever stop to think which. And Ansel Croy said, Ma'am, I'm going to need the trunks on the scale. I have replayed that exchange perhaps 1,000 times. I have decided that what she offered him was not a bribe and not a threat but a choice asterisk. She gave him both doors at once and let him pick, and that he simply did not step through either, because he was not standing in that corridor at all. He was standing at a goods door with a manifest in his hand, and the manifest was short by 2, and everything else in the world was weather. Morwenna's smile went out like a lamp. Load them, she said to her men. Her 4 plainclothes men, who had been standing at the tailgate this whole while with their hands behind their backs, moved. And young Pell, 19 years old, with his bearskin sitting on him like a borrowed hat, who had not said one word all night, stepped off the pavilion step and put himself square across the lorry's tailgate with his rifle at the order, and his chin came up, and he stood there. Croy said quietly without turning his head, Guardsman. Corporal, said Pell. Good lad. I do not think Ansel Croy ever paid a higher compliment in his life. I saw the boy's throat move. He did not budge 1 inch. The 4 men stopped. There is a thing that happens to men in plain clothes when they meet a rifle at the order held by a boy who has clearly decided to die on the spot rather than move. They discover, quite suddenly, that they are employees. One of them looked at Cassius. Cassius looked at his shoes. Sir Oren, said Morwenna, your ground crew. Falk wet his lips. Ma'am, if the watch has formally objected, the ground crew cannot lawfully. Your ground crew, Sir Oren. And I watched a man decide in real time which of 2 frightening things he was more frightened of, and I watched him get it wrong. Fetch the loaders, he said. It took 40 minutes to weigh 11 trunks, and I have never in my life been so glad of a slow machine. The freight scale at Myron Fields is a great flatbed platform of riveted steel set into the floor of the goods hall, with a brass dial the size of a dustbin lid on the wall above it, and it is 100 years old, and it is accurate to within 4 ounces, and it will not be hurried. You wheel the trunk on. You wait for the needle to stop swinging. You read it. You write it down. You wheel it off. There is no way to make it go faster, and there is no way to make it lie. Croy did the reading. I did the writing. Pell stood at the hall door with the rifle at the order and did not move once in 40 minutes, and at some point I stopped noticing him the way you stop noticing a doorframe, which I suppose is the entire art of it. Morwenna came inside. She would not sit. She stood by the office window with her back to us, looking out at the fog, and Lord Cassius stood by the trunks with his folio clutched to his front like a man holding a wound closed. The first trunk was declared as linen, personal 40 pounds. The needle went round the brass dial in a long, slow sweep and stopped at 96. Croy read it out. I wrote it down. Nobody said anything. We wheeled it off. The second was declared as garments 35 pounds. It weighed 39, which is nothing. You can put 4 pounds of anything in a trunk without meaning to. I wrote it down. Croy's face did not change. The third was declared as books and papers 60 pounds. It weighed 62. Fine. The fourth was declared as linen 40 pounds. It weighed 104. I looked up at the dial and then at Croy, and Croy was already looking at me. And in 19 years of the customs service, I had never had that particular feeling before, and I have not had it since. The feeling of a floor tilting very slowly under a building you had believed was on rock. "Ma'am," said Croy to the window, "the fourth trunk is over declaration by 64 pounds. Morwenna did not turn around. "Then the declaration is careless. I did not pack it myself, Corporal. Do you imagine I pack?" "No, ma'am." "Write sundries," she said, "and get on." We got on. Trunk 5 declared 40, weighed 111. Trunk 6 declared 30, weighed 31, an honest trunk, and by then that honest trunk felt like an insult, like a clean shirt on a man coming out of a fire. Trunk 7 declared linen, weighed 118. Trunk 8 declared 60, weighed 63. And Trunk 9, which was declared as garments, weighed 206 pounds, and it took 4 ground crew to get it onto the platform. And when they set it down, the whole hall rang like a dropped bell, and one of the loaders said out loud before he could stop himself, "That's not clothes." Cassia said, "Be quiet." "Sir, I'm only saying." "Be quiet." And then there were the 2 undeclared ones, the ones that were not on the manifest at all. The ones Morwenna had said, out on the apron, were empty and traveling for the return. The 10th weighed 141 pounds. The 11th weighed 162. I put down my pencil. I remember doing it very carefully, setting it down on the clipboard so it would not roll, because my hand had begun to shake, and I did not want anybody in that hall to see it. Croy turned from the dial. He faced the window, where the Queen Consort of Eldermore stood with her back to a room full of her own lies, and he said, "Ma'am declared 410 pounds, weighed 1,013. I'm opening them." She turned around, and I saw, for one single unguarded instant before she put her face back on, exactly what was underneath it, and it was not rage, and it was not shame. It was calculation. She was doing arithmetic. She was working out how many minutes she needed and what she could still get onto that aircraft and what she would have to leave behind, and she was doing it fast, and she was good at it. "No," she said, "you are not." Clause 9, ma'am. "Corporal, if you break the locks on my luggage tonight, I will have you in a cell by noon and out of the guard by Friday, and your mother will hear it from a newspaper. Do you understand me? I am not threatening you. I am describing the world." "Yes, ma'am," said Croy. "Where are the keys?" And that, I swear to you on my daughter, that was the point at which Lord Cassius laughed. One syllable of it, cracked and horrible, out of a face the color of the fog, and he clapped his hand over his own mouth as though he had spat. Morwenna looked at her son, the way you look at a dropped glass. Then the hall door banged, and the pilot came in. His name was Vetch. He was a solid, decent, unimaginative man who had flown for the household for 11 years, and he came in out of the fog with his cap in his hand and rein on his shoulders, and he said, to the room in general, "Ma'am, I've a foreign envoy on board asking why we're not moving. I've a slotted Ardennes key that closes at 5, and I've been told to start engines. I'd like to know by whom, because it wasn't by me." "Start them," said Morwenna. "Ma'am, the freight's not loaded." "Then we fly without the freight." Cassius's head came up so fast I heard his collar. "Mother." "We fly without the freight," she said again, and there was something new in her voice now, something with an edge under it, and I understood, we all understood in the same half-second, everybody in that hall including the loaders, that she had just given up 11 trunks and 1,000 pounds of the realm's property to save the only thing she truly needed to save, which was herself, on an aircraft, out of the jurisdiction, before the sun came up. Croy walked across the goods hall. He did not hurry. He crossed that long, echoing floor at the exact pace of a man changing post, and the sound of his boots was the only sound in the building, and he went past Morwenna, past Cassius, past the pilot, and out through the hall door into the fog, and he stopped at the foot of the air stair of the Halcyon with his rifle at the order and his back to the aircraft and his face to the pavilion. And there he stood. He did not say, "You shall not pass." He did not say anything. He simply stood at the bottom of the steps of the king's aeroplane in the fog at 4 in the morning. One man, in a red tunic and a black bearskin, with the white gloves and the metal ribbons and 11 years of standing still, and the entire departure of the Queen Consort of Eldermore from the realm of her marriage broke on him like water on a stone. The envoy came down the air stair at 4:10. His name was Erast Dune, and he represented the Principality of Vascaray, which is a small, rich place 3 hours flying east of us, with good harbors and discreet banks, and a legal tradition of asking very few questions about where a thing has been before it arrived. He was a smooth, round, courteous man in a camel coat, and he came down those steps with his hands spread, and a smile on him like a man arriving at a party. "Corporal, what a night, what a night. Come, this is all a misunderstanding of categories." "Sir," said Croy. "The trunks in your shed," Dune beamed. "They are not luggage, they are bags of the mission diplomatic freight consigned to the Principality, traveling under my accreditation. You know the convention, of course. Inviolable, not to be opened, not to be detained. It is the oldest courtesy between civilized realms, and I am quite certain the kingdom of Eldermore does not intend to be the first to break it at 4 in the morning over a scale. He said it beautifully. He said it so beautifully that I saw 2 of the loaders start to shuffle towards the trunks. Croy said, "Show me the seals, sir." Dune's smile stayed exactly where it was. "I beg your pardon." "A bag of the mission carries the seal of the sending state on the fastening, sir, and it's lodged with the Chancery before it moves, and it's entered in the diplomatic register at the port of departure, and the register is on the desk behind me, and I read it at 8 o'clock last night. There's nothing in it for Vascaray. There's nothing in it for anyone." Croy did not raise his voice 1 degree. "Those are cabin trunks with brass corners and a hasp, sir. They've got no seals on them at all. You can't make a thing diplomatic by saying it is at the bottom of the steps." The smile went. It did not crack or fall. It simply was not there anymore, the way a light is not there. "Corporal," said Dune, "I will remember your name." "It's Croy, sir. 2 letters different from cry. People get it wrong." I laughed. God forgive me, I laughed out loud once in the fog, and I put my hand over my mouth like a schoolgirl, and Erast Dune turned and went back up the air stair without another word, and I thought, that man is going to send a telegram, and in an hour this will be somebody's crisis 300 miles from here. Which it was, but not the crisis he thought. Lord Cassius came out to the air stair at 4:30. I only saw it because I had gone out to the lorry to recount the trunks for the 3rd time, which was pointless and which I did anyway, because there is a kind of fear that can only be managed by arithmetic. So I was standing at the tailgate in the dark with my clipboard when Cassius came past me across the wet apron with his coat open and his hands empty, and he walked up to the guardsman at the foot of the steps and stopped a yard from him. For a while he did not say anything at all. He just stood there and breathed, and I could hear it from 30 feet. Then he said, "Corporal, name it." "Sir." "Name it." His voice cracked in the middle. "Whatever it is, a house, a commission, real 1, not the guard, a commission in a regiment where you'd be a captain in 3 years, money. There is more money in this than you have any idea of, and you can have. He stopped and started again lower. Or nothing. You can have nothing at all and simply stand where you are for 4 more minutes and look at the fog and be a man who did not look at a lorry. Nobody would ever know. There is no God in this, Corporal. There is only a piece of paper and a scale. Sir, said Croy, why are you crying? I heard that. I have never forgotten the flatness of it, or the fact that it was not cruel, that it was, if anything, the first plainly kind question anybody had asked Lord Cassius in a very long time. Cassius put the heel of his hand against his eye. I was 18, he said. Sir, when it started. I was 18 years old and she put a pen in my hand and she told me what to write, and I wrote it, and I have been writing it ever since, and I have not slept properly in 6 years, and every single time I hear a knock on a door he broke off. He laughed horribly at the fog. And do you know what the worst of it is, Corporal? I hoped you'd stop us, when you asked for the manifest. I stood there on that apron with the warrant in my folio and I hoped. Croy said nothing. I could have put it back, said Cassius. Any night, any one of 600 nights, I could have carried it back into that vault myself in an hour. Yes, sir, said Croy, you could. And that was all he gave him. No comfort, no absolution, no contempt either. Just the truth, handed back plainly, the way he handed back a manifest with an error on it. And Lord Cassius stood in the fog under the tail of the king's aeroplane for a long moment with his hands hanging, and then he turned and walked back to the shed, and he did not offer anything again. They tried to arrest Croy at 20 to 5. Sir Orrin Falk fetched 2 aerodrome constables out of the gatehouse. Decent enough men, both of them in their 50s, both of them plainly wishing they were anywhere else, and he marched them across the apron and pointed at the guardsman standing at the foot of the air stair and said, "Obstruction. Take him." And the older constable, a man named Brill whom I had known for 6 years and who had a wife with a bad hip and a boy in the Navy, looked up at Corporal Ansel Croy, at the rifle, at the order, at the white gloves, at the metal ribbons, at the perfectly still face under the perfectly still bearskin, and said, "On whose charge, sir?" "On mine, asterisk. Sir, he's the manifest watch." "He is a asterisk, Corporal asterisk." "Yes, sir," said Brill. "He's the manifest watch, sir. It's set by the master of the household. I can't lift it, nor can you, sir, if you'll pardon me. My father was on this gate before me, and he told me that when I was a boy, and I've never once needed to be told it twice." Falk stood in the wet with his mouth working. And Morwenna, who had come out onto the apron in her green traveling coat with the fog beating on her shoulders, said, "And I heard it, though she said it quietly, and I have said it in a courtroom since under oath," she said. "Then get me a lifting order." She was, whatever else she was, a woman of enormous nerve. The courier came at 4 minutes past 5, and for 11 minutes he broke us. He came up the service road on a motorcycle with the Chancery pennant on the fairing and mud to his knees, and he came into the goods hall with his goggles up on his forehead, and a dispatch case chained to his wrist, and he asked for the officer of the manifest watch. And Ansel Croy came in from the air stair with the fog still on his shoulders and took the packet and signed the book. It was an order under the hand and seal of Lord Perrenstein, master of the household. It released the freight. It lifted the watch. It directed the officer of the manifest watch to render every assistance to the Queen Consort's departure, and to make no record of the night's proceedings, the matter being a private household affair of no public character. And it had a red wax seal on it the size of a crown piece. I felt the floor go. I want to be exact about this because it matters, and because for the rest of my life I will not be able to pretend it did not happen. When I read that order over Croy's shoulder in the light of the goods hall lamp, I believed it, and I felt something in my chest let go, something that was, I am ashamed to say, relief. Because it meant it was not our fight after all. Because it meant we could go home. Because I am not a hero and I never was, and at 5 in the morning after a night like that, an order from the master of the household with a seal on it is a warm bed and a clear conscience and somebody else's problem. Morwenna held out her hand for it. She did not snatch. She held out her hand the way a woman holds out her hand for a menu. "Now," she said, "the trunks. Sir Orin, your loaders." Falk was already moving. The loaders were already moving. Cassius let out a breath that had a sob in the middle of it and put his folio down on the scale platform, and one of the plainclothes men had a hand on the brass corner of the first trunk, and I stood there with my clipboard against my chest and my 19 years and my pension and my daughter at the school in Carden, and I did not say one word. Ansel Croy walked to the office window. He put the order flat on the sill, under the lamp. From his tunic he took a small brass thing on a chain. I had seen it 100 times and had always assumed it was a badge or a token or some sentimental article of a soldier's kit. And he opened it out, and it was a jeweler's loop. A seal cutter's glass. His father's. And he bent his head over the wax. "Corporal," said Morwenna from the doorway, "the order is discharged. You are relieved. Take your boy and go and get warm." Croy did not answer her. He did not answer her for 11 seconds, and in those 11 seconds the loaders got the first trunk half onto the trolley, and the fog came in through the open hall door in a long gray breath, and I watched the back of a guardsman's neck and understood, without knowing how I understood it, that everything in the kingdom of Eldermore was balanced on what he found in that glass. Then he straightened. He picked up the order in both white gloves. He turned around. And he said, "Ma'am, this seal is a forgery." It is a strange thing to watch a room stop. The loaders stopped. Falk stopped. Cassius, who had bent to pick up his folio, stayed bent, with his hand out and his fingers open, like a man in a painting. "Don't be absurd," said Morwenna. "Ma'am," said Croy, "the master of the household's die was cut in Chancery Yard in the year the late Queen Isolde died, out of a blank of Velenge steel on a bench under the third window. It has a crown of 7 points. On the third point from the left there's a nick in the shoulder, about the width of a hair, where the graver slipped. It's been in every seal that die has struck for 9 years. It's in the seal on my own warrant of appointment, which is in a drawer at my mother's house in Vale Row." He held up the order. "There's no nick in this one, ma'am. The crown's perfect. It's the cleanest impression I've ever seen in my life. Then it is a * good seal." "No, ma'am." And for the first and only time that night, something came into that flat, quiet voice, not anger, nothing so easy as anger, something older and colder and much worse for her. A true seal has a fault in it. Every die a man cuts has a fault in it, and the Chancery keeps the fault on purpose, and that's how you know it's real. A perfect crown means somebody copied a picture. It means somebody sat down with a good impression and a graver and made a * better *1. He lowered the paper. Whoever cut this die had never seen the die he was copying. They'd only seen the wax. And then Ansel Croy said the sentence that ended the reign of Queen Consort Morwenna of Eldermore, and he said it the way he said everything else, which is to say as though he were reading out a weight. "And the warrant your son handed me on the apron at 2:45 has got the same perfect crown on it, ma'am, same die, same forger, so it isn't a customs matter any more." Nobody breathed. "Forging the seal of an officer of the crown," said Croy, "is a treason under the statute. It is not mine to judge, and I'm not judging it. But I'll tell you what it is to me, ma'am. It means I can't take an order from a paper. Not from any paper that comes to me tonight, from anyone with any seal on it, because I've no way to know which ones are real." He set the order down on the sill, gently, the way you set down something that will be evidence. So the watch stands until a man I can see with my own eyes comes and stands in front of me and lifts it, and nothing goes on that aircraft. And now, ma'am, neither does anyone. Morwenna said, "You cannot ground me." "No, ma'am," Croy agreed, "but I can ground the aeroplane." He looked past her, through the open hall door out at the apron. "Captain Vetch," he called. The pilot came in out of the fog. He had heard all of it. You could see in the set of his shoulders that he had heard all of it. "Corporal." "That's the King's aircraft, sir. not the Queen Consort's, and it's on the Crown's register, and the Crown's register is held by the master of the household, whose seal, I've just told you, is out there in the hands of a forger. I'm serving notice on you as an officer of the Manifest Watch that the *Halcyon *S papers are in doubt. Every one of them. Airworthiness, registry, the lot. Vetch looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "Chocks are in, Corporal. I'll not lift a machine with doubtful papers. My license is my whole life." "Thank you, sir." "Captain Vetch," said Morwenna, "you are employed by this household." "By the King ma'am," said Vetch, and he put his cap back on, and he went out into the fog to pull the fuel line, and I could hear him whistling, actually whistling badly, off-key, some old marching thing, all the way across that apron, and I have never in my life loved a sound so much. At 5:20, the Queen Consort of Eldermore tried to walk out of the goods hall. She got as far as the door, and then she stopped because Ansel Croy said behind her, "Ma'am, I'm opening the trunks now, and I'd rather you were here to see me do it." She turned around very slowly. "Why," she said, "would I possibly consent to that?" "Because if you're not here," said Croy, "the record will say the Queen Consort of Eldermore left the hall when the trunks were opened, and that's the sentence that'll be in every mouth in the realm by Thursday, and there'll be nothing anyone can do about it. And because if there's an innocent explanation for £1,000 of undeclared freight, ma'am, you're the only person on this aerodrome who can give it, and this is the last hour in your life when giving it will do you any good. I have thought about that too. I have thought that it was, in its plain way, the single most merciful thing anybody said to that woman in the whole of that night, and that it was also, and at the same time, the door of the trap closing. More when I stood in the doorway of the goods hall with the fog behind her, and the lamps in front of her. "Open them," she said. And Corporal Ansel Croy, of the Royal Guard, in his white gloves, knelt down on the cold floor of a freight shed at Myron Field's aerodrome and put his hand on the hasp of the first trunk. He did it by the book, of course he did. He called me forward as the customs witness, and I stood at his shoulder with the clipboard. He called Constable Brill in from the apron as the second witness, and Brill came and took off his cap and held it, which I do not think anybody asked him to do. He read out the trunk's number and its declaration and its weighed weight, and I wrote them down, and he asked Morwenna for the key, and she said she did not have it, and he asked Cassius, and Cassius, after a silence that went on so long I heard the fog dripping off the eaves, took a ring of small brass keys out of his coat pocket and put it into a guardsman's white glove without looking at him. "Thank you, sir," said Croy. He opened the first trunk. Linen, folded, laundered, pressed, tissue between the layers, exactly as declared, sheets, pillow slips, a dressing gown, a stack of towels with the Harrogate cormorant worked into the corner in silver thread. He lifted the linen out, layer by layer, and set it on a clean tarpaulin one of the loaders had spread on the floor without being asked, and I understood then that the loaders had taken a side, and that they had taken it about an hour ago. Under the linen was a false bottom of thin varnished board. Under the board were 9 flat cases in dark green morocco, each with a small brass plate on the lid, and Croy did not open them. He lifted the first one out and read the plate, and read it out loud so that I could write it, and his voice did not change at all. Case 1. Brass plate reads, collar the Star of Eldermore, Register of Inalienable Chattels, entry 41. Brill made a small sound. The Star of Eldermore is not a jewel. It is not, only a jewel. It is the collar the sovereign's consort wears at the opening of the Great Council, and it has been worn by 9 of them, and it is on the Register of Inalienable Chattels, which is the list of things that belong not to the king but to the crown, which is to say, to nobody alive, which is to say, to the realm, which is to say, to the fishermen at Carden and the millers at Vale and my daughter and Constable Brill's boy in the Navy, and which by the chattels of the Crown Act may not be sold, given, pledged, or taken out of the realm by any person whatsoever, up to and including the king himself. Croy read out the other 8. The Isolde diadem, the pearl rope of the House of Harrogate, the mourning suite of the old Queen Mother, 2 rings. A stomacher of diamonds 211 years old. The bracelet the late Queen Isolde had been given on her wedding day and had worn, they say, every day of her life, and had left in a will proved in open court to her granddaughter. 9 cases, 9 entries on the register, in a trunk declared as 40 pounds of linen on an aircraft cleared for a foreign port at 3 o'clock in the morning with the headlamps off. "Ma'am," said Croy, still kneeling, "do you want to say anything?" "They are mine," said Morwenna. "I am the Queen Consort. They are the consort's jewels." "They're the crowns, ma'am. It says so on the plate. You could put 100 crowns on your head and it wouldn't make them yours. That's the whole point of them. The register was made so that nobody could ever say the sentence you've just said." He set the 9th case down on the tarpaulin, very gently, in line with the others. "And if you believed it, ma'am, you'd have declared them." Then he opened the 4th trunk. I have been asked since, what was the worst thing in those trunks? People expect me to say the jewels. It was not the jewels. The 4th trunk was declared as 40 pounds of linen and weighed 104, and it was full, from corner to corner, of asterisk copies. Paste, glass and gilt and clever solder, a collar that was the star of Eldermore to any eye in the world except one that had held the real thing an hour before, a diadem you could not have told from the Isolde in a lit room at 6 feet, a pearl rope that was not pearl, and each of them wrapped in tissue, and each with a paper label tied to it in a neat clerk's hand, and each label bearing a number. Croy read the numbers, and then he stopped, and then he said, and this is the only time in the whole night that his voice was not steady, he said, "These are vault shelves." I did not understand. Brill did not understand. I remember standing there with my pencil in the air. "Vault 4, shelf 9, said Croy. "Vault 4, shelf 11. That's the strong room under the Chancery. That's where the register cases live." He looked up at us, and his face was still and gray, and there was something in his eyes that I never wanted to see again. "The real ones go out of the realm on the aeroplane. The copies go back on the shelves. Numbered, so the man doing it wouldn't put them on the wrong ones." The hall was very quiet. "Nobody was ever meant to notice they were gone," said Croy. "Not this year. Not in 10 years. Not until some poor devil of a clerk took the star out for a coronation 40 years from now and found he was holding a bit of glass, and by then everyone in this shed would be dead, and it would be his fault, and nobody would ever know." He put the copy of the Star of Eldermore back into the trunk, and closed the lid, and rested one white glove on the lid for a moment, and I saw the glove shake. "Once, just once." "Continue, ma'am," he said. Morwenna said nothing at all. The 9th trunk was the one that took 4 men to lift, and when Croy turned the key in it and put up the lid, I heard Lord Cassius sit down. There was no chair. He simply sat down on the cold floor of the goods hall with his back against the leg of the freight scale, and he put his face in his hands. Inside the 9th trunk, packed in fitted wooden trays with the care of a surgeon's case, was a seal cutter's shop. A bench vise, gravers 40 of them laid in order of size, blanks of Velenge steel, a spirit lamp, a burnisher, 4 sticks of Chancery red wax and 2 of Chancery green, a press, and in a brass-bound box at the bottom, in green baize beds cut exactly to their shapes, 3 finished dies. Croy lifted them out one at a time, in his white gloves, and named them for the record, and I wrote them down, and my hand was shaking so badly by then that I have had to explain that page in a courtroom twice. Die 1, the seal of the master of the household of Eldermore. Die 2, the seal of the warden of the Chancery strong room. He stopped. He held the third one up to the lamp for a long time. "Corporal," said Brill gently, "what is it, lad?" "Die 3, said Ansel Croy, "the king's privy seal." We found the ledger in the 10th trunk, the one that was to have traveled empty for the return. It was a warrant book. A proper one, ruled and bound in half-calf, the kind the Chancery uses, and it had been kept in the same neat clerk's hand as the labels on the paste jewels, and it went back 6 years and 2 months. 41 warrants, each one entered with a date, a description, a valuation, a consignee, and a port. Each one, we would learn later, sealed with die 1 and countersigned with die 3. Silver from a chapel at Wistow. A set of tapestries from the long gallery that the household had been told were away for cleaning, and had been away for 4 years. Books. A pair of state swords. A cabinet of miniatures. The great enameled clock from the Blue Room, which the staff had been told the king had given as a gift to a foreign cousin, and which the king, it turned out, had never once been asked about. And every last item of it consigned to the same address at the same free port. Halbert Marne and Sons, Warehouse 9, Ardennes Quay, the Principality of Vascaret, which is 3 hours flying east of us, which was where the Halcyon was cleared to land, at 5 o'clock that morning, in a slot that Captain Vetch had been so anxious about. I looked up from that book, and across the goods hall, and out through the open door into the fog, and I could just make out the shape of a round, courteous man in a camel coat standing at the top of the air stair with his hands in his pockets, watching us. Erast Dune did not fly home that day. He did not fly home for quite a long time. The 11th trunk was the last, and it did not have jewels in it, and it did not have gold, and when Croy opened it there was nothing inside but paper. Household papers, files, bundles tied in pink tape, the dull gray guts of a great old family, inventories, receipts, valuations, correspondence with insurers. And at the very bottom, in a flat Japan document box with a broken lock, wrapped in a linen cloth and lying on its own, a single folded instrument on stiff cream Chancery paper. Croy lifted it out and unfolded it and read the first 4 lines, and then he stopped reading, and he knelt there on the floor of the shed with it open on his knee, and he did not move. "Corporal," I said. He did not answer. "Ansel," I said. I had never once used his name. "It's the deed," he said. "What deed?" "The trust." He turned it so I could see, and his glove was flat on the paper, and he was pointing to a line of it, and I bent down. The late Queen Isolde's bequest, all her personal jewels, everything that wasn't on the register, everything that was hers to give, held in trust for her granddaughter until she comes of age. He read it out. His voice had gone very careful, the way a man's voice goes when he is carrying something. "And the said chattels shall not be sold, pledged, exchanged, or removed from the realm, nor shall the said trust be varied, save by the hand of the trustee upon production of this instrument." I said stupidly, "Then why is it in a trunk?" And Ansel Croy said, "Because you can't produce an instrument that isn't in the realm anymore, ma'am. That's the whole of it. Take the jewels and somebody comes looking for the deed. Take the deed as well and burn it in a foreign country, and in 20 years' time there's a girl who owns nothing and can't prove she ever did, and a lot of very old people saying there was a deed once, I'm sure of it, and nobody able to lay a hand on so much as a copy." He stood up. He had knelt on that floor for the better part of an hour, and I heard his knees crack when he rose, and he turned to face the doorway where the Queen Consort of Eldermore stood in her green traveling coat. "You weren't robbing the king, ma'am," he said. "The king's got everything he needs. You were robbing a 9-year-old girl of a thing she doesn't even know she owns, and you were doing it in a way she'd never be able to argue with when she grew up. That's the part I'll not forget." And then he did the thing that finished it. He carried the deed to the office window, and he laid it under the lamp beside the forged lifting order, and he took out his father's glass, and he bent over the 2 red seals side by side. The one on the master of the household's counter-signature at the foot of the true deed, struck 9 years ago by a die cut on a bench under the third window in Chancery Yard, and the one on the paper that had come up the service road on a motorcycle an hour before. "Officer Quill," he said, "Constable Brill, come and look, please, both of you, and ma'am, if you'd care to." Brill went first, then I went. And then, God knows why, I have never worked it out, unless it is simply that no human being alive can refuse to look at the thing that is about to destroy them. Queen Consort Morwenna crossed that goods hall and bent over the sill and put her eye to a dead seal-cutter's glass. 2 crowns of 7 points. On the true one, on the third point from the left, a nick in the shoulder about the width of a hair. On the other, nothing. A perfect crown. Flawless, beautiful, and worth precisely as much as the paper it was pressed into. Nobody said anything for a while. Then Morwenna straightened up, and she looked at the guardsman across the lamp, and she said, in a voice I did not recognize, "Who are you?" "Corporal Ansel Croy, ma'am," he said. "Manifest watch." He would not send a telegram. He would not use a telephone. He had said it plainly an hour before, and he did not go back on it. "I can't take an order from a paper, and I'll not act on a voice I can't see." Whoever had cut those dies had been 6 years inside the household, and there was no way of knowing that morning how far in the rot went. And Ansel Croy had decided, standing on a cold floor at 5:30, with 100 million crowns of the realm's history spread on a tarpaulin at his feet, that he would not put one word of it down a wire. So he sent Guardsman Pell. He sent a 19-year-old boy out of that shed on the back of the Chancery courier's motorcycle, with a folded sheet of my customs paper in his tunic and nothing written on it but a weight, a count, and a request, and he told him, "You put it into the hand of Lord Stane. Not his secretary, not his man, his hand. If they won't let you in, you stand at the gate and you don't move until they do." Pell said, "Corporal," and went. And I have often thought that the making of that boy happened right there, on the pillion of a motorbike in the fog, and that whatever he becomes in that regiment, and I hear he is a sergeant now, and they say he will go further. It started at Myron Fields at 20 to 6 in the morning with a piece of my paper against his chest. Princess Adela came first. She came at 20 past 7 in a mud-colored car she had driven herself, and she got out of it in a wax coat and a pair of boots with the farm still on them, and she came into the goods hall with her hair in a scarf and no attendants of any kind, and she looked at the tarpaulin. She looked at it for a long time. The fog was thinning by then, and the light coming through the high windows of the shed had gone the color of dishwater, and there they all were, laid out in rows the way Croy had laid them. 9 green Morocco cases, 9 paste copies with their labels, 3 dies in green baize, a warrant book open at the 41st entry, and a deed of trust on stiff cream paper with a nick in the third point of its crown. Princess Adela is the king's sister. She is not a soft woman, and she has never pretended to be. She raises cattle and she chairs the hospice board, and she says what she means in the fewest words she can find. And when she had finished looking at that tarpaulin, she picked up the warrant book and read it standing, turning the pages with one finger, for 11 minutes, while nobody in that shed dared so much as cough. Then she closed it. 6 years, she said. "Yes, ma'am," said Croy. "The clock from the blue room," she said it to nobody. "He asked me about that clock at midwinter. Alaric. He said, 'Do you remember the clock, Adela, the one with the enamel?' And I said it had gone to Cousin Havard, and he said, 'Did it?' And he looked at me, and I thought." She stopped. She put the book down. She stood with her hand flat on the cover of it, and her jaw was moving. I thought he was getting old. She turned round. Morwenna was sitting on a packing case by the office door with a customs blanket round her shoulders, because it was 4 degrees in that hall, and even a Queen Consort gets cold, and Constable Brill had put it there, and she had not refused it. The 2 women looked at each other across the width of a freight shed. Adela, said Morwenna. Don't, said Princess Adela. That was all either of them said. That was the entire conversation, and it lasted perhaps 4 seconds, and I have been at trials and at funerals, and I have never heard anything land as hard as those 2 words in that empty building. Lord Perrenstein, master of the household, arrived at 8 o'clock and was sick behind the fuel bowser, which I record without any pleasure, and which I have never told anyone until now. He was a decent, fussy, elderly man, and he had held that office for 19 years, and he had never in his life done a dishonest thing, and somebody had been signing his name and pressing his crown onto instruments of the crown for 6 years and had used it to strip a strong room, and he stood in the middle of the goods hall with a forged lifting order in his hand and said over and over, "That is my seal. That is my seal. That is not my seal." Croy went and stood in front of him. "Sir," he said, "the watch was set by your office and it's yours to lift. I've held it since 2:45 and I'll hold it till you tell me otherwise, and if you'd rather send me for a court-martial for what I've done in this shed tonight, sir, I'll go quietly, and I'd do the same again." Lord Steyne looked up at him. "Corporal," he said, "how did you know?" And Croy said, "My father cut it, sir, under the 3rd window." Old Steyne's face went through something I cannot describe. Then he reached out with both hands and took hold of a guardsman's forearms, above the white gloves, and he held on to them for a moment as though he had come out of deep water and found the ladder. "When Croy," he said, "God rest him, he had a laugh like a door falling over." "He did, sir." The king came at 9:30. The fog had burned off by then, and it was one of those hard, bright winter mornings that come after a wet night, and the halcyon stood white and gleaming on the apron with its chocks in, and its steps down and nowhere at all to go, and the black cars were still parked in their closing curve where they had stopped 6 hours before with their lamps off. King Alaric came in a plain gray car with 2 outriders and no standard. He was in a dark overcoat. He came across the apron alone, past the aircraft, past the lorry and in through the goods hall door, and he stopped just inside it. I curtsied. Brill took off his cap. The loaders went back against the wall. Croy came to attention and stayed there. Nobody spoke to the king. Nobody knew how to begin. And in the end nobody had to, because he did not look at any of us. He walked to the tarpaulin and he looked down at it, and he crouched in his overcoat on the concrete of a freight shed, and he picked up one of the paste collars in his bare hands. He turned it over. He looked at the glass, and the gilt and the clever solder and the neat little label tied to it with string, Vault 4, Shelf 9. And I watched the King of Eldermore understand, all at once, with the whole of his body, what his wife had been doing to his house for 6 years while he sat at dinner with her. He did not shout. I had braced for it, I think we all had, and I think that is why Cassius had begun, very quietly, to weep on his packing case, but there was none of it. The king put the paste collar down on the tarpaulin and squared it up neatly with the others, the way a tidy man does, and stood and turned round. "Morwenna," he said. She stood up. The blanket fell off her shoulders and Brill caught it. "Was there a moment," said King Alaric, "in 6 years, 1 moment, 1 afternoon, 1 hour of 1 night, when you were going to tell me?" And she said, "No. I will say this for her, and then I will say nothing else in her favor for the rest of my life. She did not lie at the end. She was asked one true question in a cold shed by the man she had married, and she gave him one true answer, and she looked at him while she gave it." The king nodded slowly, as though she had told him the time. Then he said, "Lord Steyne, this goes to the Chancery Court, every page of it. It is not a household matter, and it will not be settled in a household way. She will have counsel and a hearing in open court, and every protection the law of this realm gives to any fishwife at Carden, and not 1 grain more. I want no summary anything. I want no quiet arrangement." His voice did not rise once. "And I want it in public, Because if the crown's own strong room can be emptied for 6 years by the hand nearest the throne, then the people of this realm are owed the sight of it being put right. He looked at the guardsman, standing at attention by the freight scale. "Corporal," he said, "you may stand at ease." "Sir," said Croy, and did not. The king almost smiled. I think if it had been any other morning in his life, he would have. They took her out at 10. Not dragged, not cuffed. 2 constables of the aerodrome, one of them Brill, walked her from the goods hall across the apron to a police car, and she walked between them with her back straight and her chin level and her hair still pinned in that plain way she had done herself in the dark, and she did not look at the aircraft as she passed it, and she did not look back at the shed. I will give her that. She went out of the realm's history on her own 2 feet. The Chancery court sat for 11 weeks. Queen Consort Morwenna was convicted on 9 counts: forging the seal of the master of the household, forging the king's privy seal, which is a treason under the statute and carried the heaviest of it, theft of chattels from the register, conspiracy to remove crown property from the realm, and the making of the substitutions, which the court called in the judgment *A fraud upon the future, a phrase I have never got out of my head. She was stripped of the style and precedence of Queen Consort by act of the Great Council. The marriage was dissolved on the king's petition. She is in the realm still, in a lawful place, serving a lawful sentence, and she will be an old woman when it ends. Lord Cassius gave evidence for the crown against his mother, and he did it over 4 days in a low, steady voice, and it was his hand. I had guessed it in the shed, and the court proved it, that had written every label on every paste jewel and every entry in that warrant book. He had been the clerk. He had been 18 when she first put a pen in his hand and told him what to write, and he was 31 when Ansel Croy asked him for the keys. The court gave him 3 years and said, in terms, that it would have given him 15 if he had not sat down on the floor of that shed and handed over a ring of brass keys without being made to. He was stripped of every office he held. He has, I am told, a small farm now on the coast, and he does not come to the capital, and once a year at midwinter he writes a letter to Princess Adela which she reads and does not answer. Sir Orrin Falk was dismissed from the controllership and convicted of misconduct in public office, and I have no more to say about him. Erast Doon was recalled to Vascaray under a cloud the size of a weather front. The principality disavowed him within a fortnight. They are a small realm with a great deal to lose, and no appetite whatever for being the free port that fenced a kingdom's crown jewels. And Warehouse 9 at Ardennes Quay was opened by their own magistrates under a treaty request in the spring. 22 of the 41 items came home: the chapel silver from Wistow, the tapestries, the state swords, the great enameled clock from the Blue Room, which is back on its bracket now, and which the king, I am told, winds himself on a Sunday and has never once mentioned to anybody. The other 19 are still out in the world somewhere, and the hunt for them goes on, and it will outlive me. They offered Ansel Croy things. I know some of what was offered because I was in the room for part of it, on a bright afternoon in the spring, in a paneled office at the palace with the windows open, when Lord Steyne and Princess Adela sat on one side of a table, and a corporal of the royal guard stood on the other with his bearskin under his arm. A commission, a gallantry award, and a ribbon to hang it from. A post at the Chancery at 3 times his pay, and a house that went with it. He turned all of it down, not rudely and not with any show. He simply said no thank you, ma'am, the way he had said I'm on duty, ma'am to me across a mug of tea in a frost. And when Princess Adela pressed him, and she did press him, she is not a woman who takes no for an answer twice. He said the only long thing I ever heard him say: "Ma'am, if you make me an officer for finding it, then the next man on that door will be looking for something to find. And that's the wrong reason to stand at a goods door. You want a man on that door who's bored, ma'am. You want a man who counts trunks in the rain for 4 years and never finds anything at all, and counts them anyway, and puts his glove on the corner of the 11th one because it's the 11th one and the paper says 9. He shifted his bearskin an inch under his arm. That's the whole trick of it. There isn't another one. So they gave him what he asked for instead, which was 3 things, and he had them written down. The first, that the manifest watch be set at every port of departure in the realm, every quay, every airfield, every railhead where a crown conveyance loads, and that it never again be a duty given out as a punishment. The second, that the dies of the household be recut, and that each new die carry a fault, and that the fault be known to 3 men only, and their names sealed. The third, and Lord Stane read it out twice, because he thought at first he had misread it, that the record of the case should show that the forgery was detected because when Croy, seal cutter of Chancery Yard, cut a true die and left the fault in it. That is in the judgment. It is the last line of it. You can go and read it. The deed went back into the strong room in May. I was asked to be there, as the customs officer of record, and so I stood in a stone room under the Chancery with Lord Stane and Princess Adela and a very frightened young clerk, and I watched the Japan box go on to Vault 4, Shelf 11, where the paste diadem had been meant to go, and I watched the true diadem go back beside it, and the pearl rope, and the collar, and the wedding day bracelet of the late Queen Isolde, which is held in trust for a girl of 9 and will be hers when she is of 8, and which nobody will ever be able to say she has no proof of, because the proof is a piece of stiff cream paper with a nicked crown pressed into red wax, and it is in that room and it is not going anywhere. Princess Adela told me afterwards what they had told the child. They told her that some of her grandmother's things had been going to be taken far away, and that a man at the aerodrome had stopped it in the middle of the night, and that they were all safe now, and that she would have them one day. And the girl asked what the man's name was. And they told her, and she said, Adela swore to me this is word for word. Is he cold? He went back on the door. That is the part nobody believes, and it is the truest part of the whole thing. 6 weeks after the King of Eldermore stood in our freight shed, Corporal Ansel Croy came back to Myron Fields on the night roster and took up the manifest watch at the goods door of the Royal Pavilion, and he stood there in the wet with his rifle at the order and his white gloves clean, and he counted trunks. I brought him a mug of tea on his first night back. I do not know what I expected. I suppose I expected everything to be different. I'm on duty, ma'am, he said. And I laughed until I had to put the mug down on the step, and he stood there and let me, with the rain coming off the eaves behind him and the fog rolling in off the runway the way it always does, and I went back into the manifest office and sorted my declarations, and read every single one of them, and signed nothing I had not read. People think luggage is what you take with you. I stood in a shed at Myron Fields on the coldest night of my life, and I learned that it is also, sometimes, what you are taking away from everybody else, from a strong room, from a chapel at Wistow, from a girl of 9 who has not been told yet, from a realm that trusts the count on a sheet of paper because it has to. And the only thing standing between all of that and a warehouse in a foreign port, at 2:45 in the morning, with the headlamps off and the engines running, was one man in a red tunic who had been told 9, and could see 11, and would not be moved.